Hello again. This is Sean, aka Cantus, and this is the second video in my sort of casual series on characters and things happening in the North in Game of Thrones: The Song of Ice and Fire. This time, I want to kind of move on to another minor character that I think has big, big significance, and I'm talking about Val. Val is a character that I think people don't really realize her significance. Or they do, but maybe they just don't really appreciate the depths of her significance. Put simply, I believe she is a co-conspirator with Mance, Stannis, Melisandre. And we'll get to all of that. But let's start with something simple. Let's start with Gilly, or Jilly, however you say her name. Gilly, it comes out in Jon's first chapter, has been spreading rumors about castles being rewarded to certain members of the Wildlings, in particular Sigorn of Then and Rattleshirt. And it's really interesting, right, that there's this rumor going around about castles being promised to Wildlings. And when Stannis finds out that there's this rumor going around, his first response is not to deny it or contest it. As a matter of fact, he's actually more concerned with who's spreading that rumor. And he doesn't know who it is. So he finds out from Melisandre that it's Gilly, that she's spreading it. And he's like, oh, you know, she's wanted for her tits, not for her mouth. And it's just curious because at that point you could say it's either a true rumor or it's not. My instinct is to think that it's true because he doesn't protest it. He doesn't assume it's false. He's more actually concerned with how it got out, which in my opinion is an implication that it's actually truthful, or it's at least a damaging rumor to him in some way. Anyways, to continue with this idea about these castles as a reward, if you fast forward to Jon's fourth point of view chapter, that's when they talk about what's going on. If you go to Jon's fourth chapter, they're having the war council with Stannis, and amongst the people who are attending this meeting is Sigorn of Then and Rattleshirt. So it's really amusing that there's a rumor about castles being rewarded that he sort of is upset with, but then you happen to see the exact same two people you heard the rumor about at that meeting. It's really curious. In particular because at some point later in that chapter, when Jon and Stannis are having their private discussion, Jon says something like, Your Grace, I hear you're wanting to give castles and lands to your people. They're not really yours to give. And Stannis accuses him of basically not even understanding how feudalism works. He says something to the effect of, you know, a king has to reward his followers. What do you expect me to do? So it's, by way of putting all this together, it seems pretty likely that there are rewards promised to Sigorn and Rattleshirt in exchange for their assistance, if you will. Now, going back to that rumor and Gilly, you have to wonder if Gilly is the one spreading this rumor, how does she know about it? Especially when Stannis is upset that there's this rumor going around in the first place. How the fuck would she know? In other words, what I'm trying to say is Stannis wouldn't ask if he kind of knew that, like, maybe so many people knew that he could, like, reasonably assume there was no way to staunch the flow of bleeding. But by virtue of him asking, like, where'd this come from, it kind of sounds like he maybe knew that there was a leak, and he probably knew that it was only one of maybe a couple of people that he had to sort through to, like, stop it. And in other words, I do believe that Gilly is probably the person who's spreading the rumor, and that's because she has access to one person that nobody else has access to. That's Val, because she is the nursemaid for Dalla's son and also her own son, who I believe are staying in Val's quarters. So the point is Gilly gets to hang out with Val, probably in private, and Val can tell her whatever. So according to my theory, Val basically is telling her, oh yeah, they're going to get these castles. But then you have to wonder, why would Val know this? You know, in my opinion, the only reason Val would know this is because somebody told her. In other words, somebody's telling her, making these deals, etc., etc. And you might think, well, why would anybody be talking to Val? She's not even royalty. She's not that important. I mean, we know that Stannis and other people insist she's a wildling princess, but they're not so daft as to not know that she's not really the military figurehead that Mance or any of the other wildling chieftains are. At least we think. So let's move on and shift gears a little bit with regards to Val. So if we talk about Mance's execution, here's an interesting fact. One, at the beginning of that chapter, this is Jon's second point of view chapter in A Dance with Dragons, Jon, I believe, reflects on, it's either Jon's second or third chapter, sorry, but he reflects on the fact that, or actually it might be Gilly that tells her, the point is that there's this moment where he finds out that Val basically knelt before Stannis and begged and said, if you will spare Mance Rayder, I will do whatever. I will stop being disobedient and I'll marry whoever. Just let Mance live. Now, prior to that, Jon has this recollection where he's thinking about how many times Val has tried to escape. As a matter of fact, she almost killed the guy because she cut his neck and he almost bled out. So the point is Val's like this very wild, rebellious creature. But then Mance is executed. And from that moment on, she is completely subservient. She's so subservient that when Jon lets her go to go find Tormund, she comes back and basically says, hey, I'm back now. Are you going to put me back in my cage or can I stay somewhere else? My point is, this rebellious creature who wanted nothing to do with anybody there and wanted to escape, who said, if you let Mance live, I will be obedient and whatever. She's coy, she's docile, she doesn't fight at all after Mance is executed. It's a direct violation of the offer she made to Stannis. The only way that, you could either say that, maybe she's so terrified she just completely goes along with it. I don't know. She seems like a real badass, and it kind of seems hard to believe that she would just give up. Especially given that she's so full of life and character, aside from the fact that she still seems to be a willing prisoner. It just doesn't make sense. What makes more sense is that she somehow knows that Mance is still alive. Whether or not that's something that Stannis and Melisandre wanted her to know or let her in on, that's a bit unclear. I believe so, but we'll continue for now. Anyways, at Mance's execution, she's crowned. She's up on the raised platform above the fire pit with Stannis. She's standing right next to him. So this is the amusing part, is that all of the people who come forward and kneel before Stannis to basically accept his rule, if you will, and survive by being taken in, they're kneeling before Stannis and they're kneeling before Val. Now, I don't really know the significance of all of this, explicitly, but it seems to me that having Val wear this crown, it's like a circlet of bronze, if I understand right, and having them kneel before her and Stannis, it might be some device to kind of make it easier for the wildlings to swear fealty, because they're kneeling, right? But they, in their minds, maybe get to say, well, I'm actually pledging my fealty to Val. Stannis just happens to be this asshole standing up there next to her. And so I think maybe that's something that was done deliberately so that the wildlings don't feel as bad about kneeling before Stannis. Or it could be that they literally were pledging fealty to both, or specifically Val in particular. We don't know. So one thing I wanted to say, though, about this is, sorry, I got a little distracting message on my phone. One thing that it's interesting is that if you go to Jon's fourth point of view chapter, this is the War Council. It's one of my favorite chapters in the book. There's this bit where Jon is talking about, it's the real, one of the pivotal moments in the book, where Jon says, hey, leave the wildling vanguard with me. Don't take them. I can tell you where to get 3,000 more men. We all know it. It's an unmissable segment of that chapter. Now, what is missable in that chapter is the fact that right after Jon convinces Stannis to leave 300 men behind so he can get 3,000 more, Stannis is like, all right, this is obviously a good idea. I'm not an idiot. If I leave the vanguard with you, do you promise to keep Val safe? Will you, I need a promise from you. And the reason that is so noteworthy is because Val was not a part of the discussion at all up until that moment. It makes you kind of wonder why suddenly do we need to talk about Val? Now, again, I'm dealing largely with implications here, so I can't really fault anybody who thinks that I'm a little crazy for having certain opinions about this, but it seems to me that maybe what Stannis kind of lets out of the bag here is that he was planning on taking Val with her, or with him on his march. Maybe Val and the Wildling Vanguard need to go together for whatever reason. That makes, I think, some sense. At least it makes more sense it makes more sense than assuming Val was going to be there anyways, but then suddenly deciding to make sure that Val was going to be kept safe. It just seems confusing in terms of the timing of that question being brought up. So, again, what I'd like to point out is it feels like Val and the Vanguard being together might have something to do with that oath of fealty, that kneeling that they did before her during Mance's execution. It's just interesting. Especially in light of the subservience that she displays. It makes you wonder if Val is in charge of the Wildling Vanguard because they swore fealty to her, and her docile subservience implies that she might know something about Mance's fate. You can see where this all ties into, like, what's going on. It's confusing, especially if these Wildling leaders are going to get castles. It really feels like we're not being shown the full set of cards that the other people are playing with, that there are tricks up their sleeves. Now, this is where I want to go off on a hypothetical tangent and ask you, what if Jon said yes to Stannis' offer? What if he said, yes, sure, make me Lord of Winterfell and hook me up with Val? That would be great. I mean, it didn't happen, but there's a certain, I think, value in exploring this hypothetical. If Jon married Val and became Lord of Winterfell, it's not like Stannis is in a position to actually say, here's Winterfell, go take it. And obviously Jon really couldn't stay at Castle Black because he would kind of have violated his oaths, or at least he wouldn't be Lord Commander anymore. He'd probably have to vacate. So he'd have to probably go with Stannis. Now here's the novel thing about it. Stannis isn't going to just send some letter around saying, hey, guess what? Jon the Bastard Snow just married a wildling. How about all you northern people back me up? Like, if you think about it, that's not gonna compel anybody to join your side. As a matter of fact, the only people it might sway is the wildlings. But he already has the Wildling Vanguard. My point is Jon by himself doesn't do shit immediately in terms of what he adds to Stannis's forces. My point is, let's say Jon was to join Val and they get some alliance with the wildlings. Just having Jon troop around with those 300 Wildling Vanguard just doesn't make sense. It doesn't add enough value to have done all that work. What makes more sense, in my opinion, is that the reason to have Val and Jon married is so that they could have a separate force of wildlings going off and doing something else. I talk about this more in the essay that hasn't come out, but the point is that if you look at A Song of Ice and Fire from a statistical perspective, and what I mean by that is if you just follow the story and analyze the trends, when it comes to militaries moving around and having conflicts in the series, both I think historically, like prior to the events of the War of the Five Kings, and also during the books themselves, most armies seem to operate with like multiple divisions. I'm not a real military expert, but the point is multiple forces moving around. You've got Aegon, wherever his name is, the Young Dragon, and Aerys Oakenfist. You've got the two of them taking over Dorne because one of them fought everybody in the Prince's Pass and the other one sailed up the Greenblood and wrecked face. The point is and then you've got you've got Robb Stark's forces coming down and wrecking face because you've got Robb going to Oxcross and doing all sorts of shit over there, while Roose Bolton is in Harrenhal, and then he's sending forces off to Duskendale. I mean, we all know that that's like some other shenanigans, but the point is people are splitting up. They're always working on multiple fronts because that's where the intrigue comes from. So, in my opinion, the idea of getting Val and Jon together and this alliance with the wildlings was really about having a separate force that could threaten his enemies on multiple fronts. So I believe that was the goal here. In any case, it's just interesting, especially when you combine it with my previous video about Mance's true mission, that you have Val, who knows stuff, clearly probably knows that Mance is still alive, likely knows about secret deals because she was probably in on them with Melisandre and Stannis. And she also is willingly let go by Jon, but Melisandre doesn't protest, to go find Tormund, again with the idea that there was this secret idea of a meeting alliance with Tormund. You can see why, in my opinion, Val is a whole lot more significant than we might have initially suspected. And I want to end this little brief video by talking about some other final details about her. And one of them is the fact that Toreg, Tormund's son, Toreg the Tall, he becomes apparently, according to Jon, infatuated with Val. There's that moment in Jon's last chapter where Toreg comes back and Jon finds Leathers walking around the yard, if I remember right. And he's basically saying, hey, what's going on? Give me an update. And Leathers is like, oh yeah, Toreg showed up with 80 guys. And he's currently hanging out with in the tower, Hardin's tower, because he's taken a liking to one of those milkmaids. Like Leathers is like believes that like he's not after Val, he's after like one of the nursemaids. And the amusing part is Jon immediately is like, no, he likes Val. You know, might as well be him anyways. He has aspirations. Maybe he wants to be the new king of the wildlings, better than Garrett's Kingblood. So the point is what if it has nothing to do with that at all? I've kind of established that Val has huge significance in ways that Jon, I don't think, really realized. What if Toreg is talking to Val because of logistics related to whatever secret alliance they've got going on? Now, what does it all mean? What is this secret alliance about? I don't really want to talk about that right now, so I feel comfortable stopping here and just saying I hope that this has given you new reasons to ponder what the hell Val does, what she means, how important is she. So I'm going to have to pause for a few minutes and think about the next video I want to do, but I think that this was a good start for what I want to talk about next.